Shay's fingers hovered over the ATM screen, staring blankly at the zero balance, blinking back at her 0.4 years of non-stop labor. 47,800 yuan total, every single cent gone without a single warning. Today marked two life-altering milestones rolled into one messy, suffocating day. Her official 18th birthday and her older sister Lila's wedding day. She'd never thought her own mother would be the one to drain every penny from her bank card. The account had been opened when Shay was 15, dragged to the bank by her mom under the pretense of helping her kid manage pocket change. Shay had typed her private password slow and careful back then, oblivious her mother memorized every digit right over her shoulder. No theft alert, no phone call, no text to ask permission, just a full cash withdrawal at the counter 2 days prior, all her life earnings handed straight over to fund Lila's fancy dowry. Shay leaned her forehead against the cold ATM glass, replaying every shift she dragged herself through to stack that money. Weekends slinging syrupy bubble tea behind a sticky cafe counter, weekday evenings tutoring rowdy elementary kids through math homework, entire summer breaks locked in a freezing supermarket stockroom restocking frozen goods until midnight. Her palms still carried faint, pale scarring from winter frostbite, skin cracked raw from hours handling icy inventory without proper gloves. Every scar matched a dollar she'd scraped together for her university tuition, a future she'd planned entirely on her own. "Hey kid, you alright?" A convenience store clerk called out as Shay wandered past the glass front, her shoulders hunched tight. She forced a half-hearted smile and shook her head, grabbing a cheap bottled water and sinking onto the concrete steps outside the shop. The entire neighborhood blazed with scarlet wedding decor, red streamers strung across every lamppost, inflatable wedding balloons bobbing outside apartment buildings, firecracker crumbs littering every sidewalk. Her dad had booked 12 full banquet tables at the local restaurant, bragging nonstop for weeks about how lavish Lila's dowry would be to impress her wealthy groom's family. Shay's mother had casually mentioned the full dowry some only 3 days ago, 168,000 yuan total, framed as a perfect, respectable gift for her eldest daughter's marriage. Back then, Shay hadn't connected the dots. Now every piece clicked into place, sharp and brutal. Her parents had scraped together 80,000 yuan cash themselves, splashed another 40,200 on gold wedding jewelry for Lila, and plugged the remaining gap with Shay's hard-earned 47,800. No consultation, no advance notice, no promise of repayment discussed before the money vanished. She dragged her feet up the apartment stairwell, neighbors stopping to grin and offer wedding congratulations as she passed. Each polite well-wish felt like a sharp jab to the ribs. Her mother leaned over the third-floor balcony, hanging laundry, and spotted her instantly, waving her over impatiently. "Hurry up inside. Lila's makeup artist finishes in 10 minutes. We need you in matching guest attire before the bridal party arrives." Her mom's voice carried zero softness, purely rushed annoyance. Shay planted her feet on the landing, refusing to step another foot upward. "Where's the money from my bank account?" Her mother's laundry movements froze for a split second, then she resumed folding bedsheets like nothing had been said, lowering her voice to a sharp hiss. "Don't yell out here. Every neighbor's listening that we'll talk privately indoors. I want an answer right now. Did you withdraw my 47,800 yuan?" Shay's tone stayed flat. No screaming, just cold, unshakable certainty. The woman sighed heavily, abandoning the laundry basket to march inside and yank Shay through the front door, dragging her straight into the closed-off kitchen to avoid the rest of the household's chatter. Lila giggled loudly in the adjacent bedroom, the makeup artist cooing compliments about her bridal features, while her father chatted on the phone coordinating banquet seating arrangements. A thick red envelope stuffed full of cash sat prominently on the coffee table, the official dowry envelope her mom had specially purchased the week prior. Her mother twisted the kitchen faucet on and off, scrubbing a pile of vegetables to avoid eye contact for a long beat before finally snapping a reply. "I borrowed it temporarily to cover Lila's dowry shortfall. I'll pay you back eventually. No need to throw a fit." "Borrowed? You never asked for permission. You never even texted me to say you needed it." Shay crossed her arms, jaw tight. "That money's my university registration fee. 8,500 yuan due next month, and I don't have a single cent left to cover it now." Her mother tossed the dish rag hard against the countertop, frustration boiling over immediately. "Can you really not set this petty money argument aside for your sister's wedding day? This is the biggest day of her entire life, and you're out here throwing a tantrum to ruin it." That sentence landed harder than any raised voice ever could. Shay processed the weight of it silently, realizing her mother truly viewed her asking for her own stolen savings as disruptive, ungrateful drama instead of a legitimate, justified demand. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern stretching back years, etched into every memory of growing up second best to Lila. Flashbacks flooded her unbidden, sharp and vivid. The summer she turned 15, Lila received an acceptance letter to a top-tier university, tuition and living expenses totaling 23,000 yuan annually. Their parents had pulled out a savings account without hesitation, handing over a full 30,000 yuan card with zero pushback, repeating the same line. "Our oldest daughter deserves every bit of support." That same summer, Shay had begged for a 398 yuan pair of popular athletic sneakers, every classmate at her junior high wearing the same style. Her mother shot the request down instantly, pointing to Lila's hand-me-down sneakers 2 sizes too big for Shay's small feet. She'd stuffed cotton balls inside the toes for an entire school year just to avoid walking around in ragged, worn-out shoes. That exact summer, she picked up her first bubble tea shop shift, determined to build a safety net no one could take away. 3 years of backbreaking labor followed that first paycheck. Every spare minute of her teenage schedule dedicated to earning cash, sacrificing sleep, social outings, free weekends to stack every yuan possible. Her mother never once asked if she was exhausted, never bought her warm gloves for the freezing supermarket stockroom shifts, never acknowledged the raw frostbite scars crisscrossing her palms. But she dropped 500 yuan without a second thought on luxury hand cream for Lila the same winter Shay's hands split open from sub-zero temperatures. Lila had caught her working overtime in the supermarket once during winter break, decked out in a brand new designer down jacket, fresh manicure, a bag full of imported snacks hanging off her arm. She'd stared at Shay stacking frozen meat in the cold aisle and tilted her head, genuinely confused. Why are you working so much? Mom and Dad cover all my school costs. They'll handle yours too eventually, right? Shay had only mumbled that she was saving for tuition back then, too drained to explain the unequal treatment baked into their household dynamic. Lila just patted her shoulder and praised her for being incredibly hardworking, completely oblivious to how hollow the compliment sounded to her younger sister. Lila lived in a bubble where parental financial support was an unshakable birthright, never once stopping to consider her sibling had to build her future from scratch alone. Shay pulled herself back to the present kitchen argument, cutting through her mother's empty promises about future repayment. When exactly will you return the full 47,800 months? Years? Lila's entire dowry totals 168,000 yuan, and you had zero trouble rounding up that massive sum in under a week. Suddenly, an 8,500 tuition fee for me is impossible to cover. Her father wandered into the kitchen mid-argument, a lit cigarette pinched between his fingers, overhearing every word, yet he stayed silent, staring at the linoleum floor without a single word of defense or compromise for Shay. The silence spoke volumes. He agreed with his wife's choice to prioritize Lila's wedding over Shay's education. By 10 o'clock sharp, the wedding firecrackers erupted outside the apartment complex, deafening blasts echoing through every hallway. Lila stepped out of her bedroom draped in a vibrant red embroidered bridal gown, flawless makeup layered across her face, radiating pure joy. Their parents both teared up, pulling her into a tight, emotional hug, gushing over how beautiful their eldest daughter looked on her wedding day. Lila paused when she walked past Shay's stationary figure on the living room couch, her smile faltering slightly. Why do you look so upset? This is such a happy day for a whole family. Shay locked eyes with her sister, voice steady and unwavering. Your dowry envelope contains 47,800 yuan I earned over 3 years of non-stop part-time work. Mom took all of it without telling me first. Did you know she planned to use my savings for your wedding? A flicker of guilty shock flashed across Lila's face, her gaze darting nervously toward their mother, who instantly rushed forward to herd the bride toward the apartment doorway, cutting the conversation short. The auspicious departure time's almost gone. Stop lingering chatting. Before Lila was pushed out the door to the waiting wedding car fleet, she tossed Shay a fleeting, conflicted glance, but she never spoke up to refuse the stolen money, never confronted their mother about the unfair theft, never offered to pull the cash out of her dowry envelope right then and there. She simply climbed into the decorated luxury sedan, letting the firecracker noise swallow any unspoken grievances between the two sisters. Their mother whirled back to Shay the second the bridal vehicle pulled away from the curb, frustration thick in her tone. Are you satisfied now? You ruined Lila's perfect send-off with your petty money complaint. Me asking for my own hard-earned money is petty. You spent 3 years watching me work myself ragged for that cash, then stole it overnight to buy Lila a fancy reputation-boosting dowry. If today were my wedding instead of hers, would you drain all my savings to fund a 168,000 yuan dowry for me? Shay shot back, the question hanging heavy in the quiet living room. Her mother couldn't muster a single reply. They both knew the honest answer was a resounding no. The 12 banquet tables filled up fast at the neighborhood restaurant, Shay relegated to the furthest corner table surrounded by distant, unfamiliar relatives, completely excluded from the main head table reserved for Lila, her groom, and their parents. No one sought her out to check in. No one invited her over to join the family celebration. Her mother spent the entire reception bragging loudly to every guest about the massive 168,000 yuan dowry they'd gifted Lila, soaking up endless praise from the groom's family for being such a generous, thoughtful set of in-laws. A distant male cousin seated beside Shay glanced over at her untouched plate of banquet food and struck up small talk. Your sister hit the jackpot marrying a bank employee with a stable high salary. You heading off to university soon, right? Must have had your tuition fund locked down already. Shay gripped her chopsticks tight, staring down at her plate without offering a response, the hollow ache in her chest expanding wider with every passing minute of the celebration built entirely on her stolen future savings. As the reception wound down, her mother carried a half-empty wine glass over to the corner table, sliding into the seat next to Shay, her voice lowered to a strained whisper. Stay behind after all the guests leave. We'll sort this money repayment out privately once the venue clears out. Sort out how? You've already repeated the same vague promise of pay me back later for hours now, with no concrete timeline whatsoever. Shay tilted her head, unimpressed by the empty olive branch. Her mother's jaw tightened, defensive irritation rising again. Lila's just newly married, her household budget's tight right off the bat. Give her time to settle into married life first. 3 years of my youth spent working every free hour to build that fund isn't enough time for you to plan ahead before stealing it. But I'm supposed to wait an unknown number of years for my own money back? Shay stood up from the table, abandoning her uneaten meal, ready to face the inevitable post-banquet confrontation waiting back at the apartment. The restaurant's banquet hall emptied slow, tablecloths stained red with wine, and wedding candy wrappers scattered across every surface. Shay dragged her feet back to the apartment alone, every step heavier than the last. When she pushed open the front door, the air reeked of leftover wedding incense and cheap cigarette smoke. Her father slouched on the sofa, staring blankly at the wall, while her mother hunched over the coffee table sorting thick stacks of red wedding gift envelopes, counting cash one by one without glancing up at Shay's arrival. Total wedding gifts hit 36,800 yuan. Mom announced flatly after finishing the last stack, finally lifting her eyes to Shay like she'd just solved all their problems. Your university registration fee of 8,500 can come straight out of this gift money. Problem solved. Shay let out a hollow, bitter laugh, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed tight over her chest. Those gifts belong to Lila. They're congratulatory money for her marriage, not a replacement for the $47,800 you stole from me. All money under this roof belongs to the whole family. What's yours is ours. What's hers is ours too. Stop drawing such ridiculous dividing lines. Mom snapped, shoving a pile of cash envelopes to the side hard enough a few slid off the table edge onto the floor. Shay's gaze dropped to the faint frostbite scars crisscrossing her palms, raw and faded, but impossible to miss. When I spent every winter restocking frozen supermarket inventory without gloves, did you call my suffering family shared burden? When Lila's hands got dry from college air conditioning, you dropped 500 yuan on luxury hand cream for her without a second thought. Where was that family shared everything logic then? Mom's mouth opened and shut repeatedly, no rebuttal ready to fire back. She couldn't deny the double standard staring her straight in the face. Dad finally stirred off the couch, flicking the dead cigarette butt into an empty soda can on the floor, his voice gruff and tired like he'd been forced to mediate a fight he didn't care about. We said we'll pay the full sum back eventually. That's enough compromise for you. Shay's head tilted, sharp and unyielding. I don't care about the repayment timeline right now, and I just need one honest answer from you two. Why was Lila's education fully funded by you, while I've had to scrape every cent of my tuition together alone since I turned 15? Dad stared at his scuffed leather shoes, voice mumbled and weak. She's the eldest daughter. Naturally, we prioritize her. Am I just a backup kid meant to sacrifice everything to prop her up? Shay shot back, listing every unequal memory she'd buried down for years, each word sharper than the last. I never begged for a brand new flagship phone while Lila walked around with a 5,800 yuan smartphone freshman year. I made do with a beat-up 120 yuan second-hand device for 3 years and never complained. I wore her oversized hand-me-down jackets, stuffed with cotton, to fill the extra space all through high school and never asked for new clothes. Every single birthday of mine, you pushed my celebration aside to combine it with Lila's, saying 2 cakes were a waste of money, and I never threw a single fit over it. The only thing I ever worked to own fully was that 47,800 yuan savings fund, and you took it all without a single word of warning. She pushed off the doorframe and stood straight, shoulders rigid, no tears in her eyes, only cold exhaustion. I thought that money was mine to build my future on. Turns out even that small piece of security wasn't safe in this house. Mom's eyes welled up instantly, her voice cracking with what Shay recognized instantly as performative sorrow, not genuine remorse. Don't talk like that, I never meant to hurt you. You didn't mean to hurt me, you just didn't stop to think about me at all. Shay cut her off calm and clear. That's the difference. You didn't commit some evil scheme to hurt me, you just grew so used to putting Lila's needs above mine that my struggles never crossed your mind once. Mom broke down into messy sobs right there at the coffee table, shoulders shaking violently. Shay watched her cry without a flicker of sympathy in her chest. She knew the tears weren't guilt over stealing her daughter's life savings. They were frustration that Shay refused to swallow the unfair treatment quietly, that she dared to disrupt the perfect, favored life Mom had built for Lila. No one else spoke for the rest of the night. Shay retreated to her tiny, cramped bedroom, collapsing onto her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling until sunrise. She didn't sleep a single minute, replaying every shift, every freezing night in the supermarket, every skipped school social event she'd sacrificed to fill that bank account. All of it had vanished for a dowry meant to make Lila look impressive to her wealthy in-laws. The next afternoon, the home landline blared loud enough to echo through every room. Mom snatched the receiver instantly, her tone shifting instantly to soft, doting warmth reserved only for Lila. Shay pressed her ear flat against the thin bedroom wall, catching every word of the conversation crystal clear. Your sister threw a huge scene at the wedding yesterday over that dowry money. I told her I'd pay her back later, but she's being unreasonable and stubborn about it. Won't let the matter rest. Mom sighed dramatically into the phone, painting herself as the wronged, overworked parent dealing with an ungrateful, dramatic youngest child. Shay's chest tightened hearing the one-sided retelling, every unfair spin of the story chipping away at whatever tiny shred of familial loyalty she'd clung to for 18 years. Minutes after Mom hung up, her personal cell phone buzzed with an incoming call from Lila. She hesitated for 2 full rings before tapping accept. Hey, sis. Lila's voice sounded sheepish on the other end of the line, faint wedding reception chatter humming softly in the background of her new marital home. Mom told me everything that went down yesterday. She admitted she messed up taking your savings without asking first. I'll push her to get the full amount returned to you soon, okay? Don't stay mad at the whole family over this. Shay's tone stayed flat, no trace of anger, just quiet curiosity as she dug for the truth she'd suspected all along. Before Mom withdrew the cash from my account, did she tell you exactly where the extra 47,800 yuan for your dowry was coming from? A 3-second silence stretched over the call line, heavy and telling. Lila's hesitation alone answered every unspoken question Shay had. Yeah, she told me the day before she went to the bank to withdraw it. Lila mumbled quietly, shame thick in her voice. Shay gripped her phone tighter, knuckles white. You knew every single cent of that money came from 3 years of my non-stop part-time labor, and you didn't say a single word to stop her from taking it. I didn't know what to do in the moment. Mom already had her heart set on hitting that 168,000 dowry number to impress my husband's family. Lila rushed to defend herself, excuses spilling out rapid fire. I told her it was her choice to make. I didn't want to step between her and her plans for my wedding. Telling her it's her call is the exact same thing as giving her permission to steal my money. Shay pointed out bluntly, no room to twist the wording. You only needed one simple sentence to stop the whole thing. This is Shay's hard-earned savings. We can't use it for my dowry. That's all it would have taken, and you chose not to say it. Lila stumbled over half-baked apologies, rambling about newlywed stress and complicated family dynamics, but Shay cut her off gently before the excuses could pile higher. I get it, Lila. You've spent your whole life getting everything handed to you without sacrifice, so you never stopped to consider how losing that fund would destroy all my plans. It's not even your fault, really. This household trained you to prioritize your own comfort first without a second thought for me. She hung up the call without waiting for Lila's response, tossing her phone onto her desk and staring at the wall for hours. 2 days later, the front door banged open, and Auntie May marched inside, summoned by Mom to play the family mediator and pressure Shay into dropping the money dispute. Auntie May settled onto the living room sofa, crossing her arms and launching into a long, patronizing lecture before Shay could even sit down. Your mother said you're refusing to back down over a little cash fight with your sister on her wedding day. Families shouldn't bicker over trivial sums of money like this. 47,800 yuan isn't trivial. Shay corrected her immediately, cutting through the speech before it could go further. I worked every spare hour from age 15 to 18 to earn that total. Mom took it without consent to fund Lila's dowry, and now I have zero money to cover my university registration fee due next month. 8,500 yuan I can't come up with anywhere else. Auntie May's confident lecturing tone vanished instantly, her eyes widening in genuine shock at the full number. She glanced sideways at Mom, who stared at the floor avoiding eye contact, too guilty to meet her older sister's gaze. Look, kid, if cash is that tight for your school fees, I can lend you the 8,500 right now to tide you over, Auntie May offered, softening her sharp attitude fast once she grasped the full scale of the unfair situation. Shay shook her head firmly, declining the offer without hesitation. I appreciate you stepping up to help, but I don't want borrowed money to fix a problem my own parents created by stealing my savings. I just want back what's legally and fully mine to begin with. Auntie May sighed deep, rubbing her temples in frustration. You're far too rigid about this whole thing. Your sister's marriage is a huge milestone for all of us. She's got enough stress adjusting to married life without you breathing down everyone's neck about old savings. Shay's patience snapped thin at the biased comment, voice sharp and unapologetic. Everyone's allowed to sympathize with Lila's struggles, but no one stops to ask how I've struggled for 3 years straight to build that fund. Why is her comfort automatically more important than my education and future? Auntie May fell silent, unable to argue against the obvious double standard laid out plain before her eyes. Before she left the apartment that evening, she pulled Mom aside in the entryway and spoke loud enough for Shay to overhear every word. That money belongs to the youngest girl. You need to return it to her as soon as possible. No more dragging your feet on repayment. Mom didn't utter a single word of agreement or acknowledgement, staring straight ahead with a stubborn, closed-off expression. 5 full days passed without a single cent returned to Shay. No concrete repayment plan proposed. No sincere apology offered from either parent. Mom's attitude shifted entirely over those days, from vague promises to pay her back to irritated resentment every time Shay brought up the stolen savings, snapping that she couldn't stop rehashing the same fight nonstop. Dad fully retreated into silent avoidance, ducking out of the house early each morning and coming home late at night just to evade any conversation about the money. Shay sat alone in her bedroom that evening, weighing every possible outcome of staying in the apartment long term. If she stayed, she'd spend the next several months begging for her own stolen cash, watching her parents continue funneling every available resource to Lila while scraping by a loan to fund her university tuition. The endless cycle of unfair treatment would never break, no matter how many arguments she had. She grabbed a worn canvas backpack from the closet, tossing a few changes of clothes, her textbooks, beat-up secondhand phone charger, and a small stack of cash she'd hidden away from her recent tutoring shifts inside the bag. When she stepped out of her bedroom carrying the packed luggage, Mom looked up from folding laundry, confusion etched across her face. What's that backpack for? Where are you heading off to at this hour? Shay stood firm in the middle of the living room, no trace of hesitation in her posture. I'm moving out. I'm dropping the demand for the full 47,800 yuan back entirely. I'll cover all university costs and living expenses on my own from this point forward, and you won't have to worry about supporting me financially ever again. Mom shot to her feet in alarm, hands trembling slightly. You're 18 years old. You can't move out alone. The city's dangerous for a young girl living by herself. At 15, you expected me to work 12-hour shifts through freezing winter nights with zero concern for my safety or well-being. Shay replied calmly, every word weighted with 3 years of unspoken resentment. I've already figured out how to survive alone for 3 years now. I can manage independent housing just fine at 18. Quit throwing this dramatic fit and put the bag away, Mom shouted, voice rising sharp with panic. Shay held up a hand to cut her off, one final question hanging between them like a heavy weight. Answer me honestly, just once. If you only had one daughter, if Lila never existed, would you drain every penny she'd earned over 3 years of grueling labor to hand over as a dowry for someone else's wedding? Mom froze completely, lips parted, but unable to form a single word. They both knew the truthful answer was an absolute no. She'd protect a single child with every resource she owned, never dream of taking their life savings away. Shay nodded slowly, accepting the unspoken truth hanging in the air. You wouldn't, because you'd care about that only child's future. But with 2 daughters, you split your love and your support. One gets all your care and money. The other gets nothing but sacrifice. That forgotten child is me. I don't hate you, Mom, but I can't keep living under this roof, where I'm always the afterthought, always the one expected to give up everything for Lila's happiness. She slung the backpack strap over one shoulder, stepping toward the front door without glancing back. Mom's voice cracked behind her, thick with fear and desperation. Where will you stay? How will you afford rent and food all on your own? Shay paused at the threshold, turning her head slightly to glance over her shoulder without fully facing her mother. I've been figuring out how to survive alone since I turned 15. I don't need anyone's help to keep going now. She twisted the doorknob, stepped out into the hallway, and descended the stairwell without a single backward glance. Her legs shook weak under her weight halfway down the flights, but she kept walking forward, no urge to turn around and beg for the unequal family dynamic she'd spent 18 years trapped inside. The stairwell's cold concrete bit at Shay's calves as she kept walking down, backpack straps digging sore indentations into her shoulders. She didn't slow, didn't glance back at the third-floor landing where her mom's quiet sobs echoed faintly through the closed apartment door. By the time she hit the street-level sidewalk, her hands shook, but her resolve didn't waver for even a second. She had zero desire to return to a home that only saw her as a disposable piggy bank for Lila's perfect life. Shay spent 2 hours wandering the outskirts of the downtown district, scrolling cheap rental listings on her beat-up secondhand phone. Luxury apartments were far out of her tiny leftover tutoring cash budget, so she zeroed in on cramped single rooms tucked deep inside an old urban village, stacked tight between noisy food stalls and laundromats. The landlord showed her a unit barely bigger than a closet, a single twin bed, wobbly plastic desk, rickety wardrobe. No air conditioning, only a cracked window that barely circulated muggy summer air. Rent hit $450 a month, plus utilities pushing the total close to $500 as she handed over the deposit on the spot without hesitation. That night, she dragged her backpack into the empty room, set up a 20-yuan USB mini clip fan she picked up from a street stall, and collapsed onto the thin mattress. July heat baked the room nonstop. Sweat soaked through her shirt within minutes, the tiny fan buzzing weakly as it pushed warm air back and forth. She didn't complain. This small, shabby room was the first space she'd ever owned fully, with no one lurking to take her earnings or demand she sacrifice her own goals for someone else. First thing the next morning, Shay mapped out a brutal dual-job schedule to rebuild her shattered savings. Days were spent waiting tables at a local fast food diner, pulling 8-hour shifts for a steady monthly wage of 2,400 yuan. 3 nights a week, she kept her old elementary math tutoring gigs, earning an extra 80 yuan per session after dinner. Her original university enrollment plan was dead in the water. She couldn't scrape together the 8,500 registration fee by the deadline, so she made the painful call to delay formal college for a full year, focusing all energy on stacking cash for tuition first. Her mom blew up Shay's phone nonstop that first week of living alone. 11 missed calls piled up in the log, dozens of unread WeChat messages flooding her inbox, all repeating the same hollow pleas. Come home. It's unsafe living by yourself. Mom knows I messed up. I'll find a way to pay back your 47,800 yuan. Shay didn't answer a single call, didn't open a single message notification. Every text was just another attempt to drag her back into the same toxic imbalance she'd fled. By the start of week 2, her dad took over the relentless calling spree. Shay hesitated for 3 long rings before tapping accept, half expecting genuine accountability from him, not just more empty bargaining. Your mom hasn't eaten a full meal since you moved out. She sits on the balcony staring at the street all night worrying about you. Dad's gruff voice crackled through the phone speaker, heavy with manufactured sorrow. Just pack your bag and come back home. Everything can be smoothed over between us. Shay leaned against the diner's back storage wall during her brief shift break, tone flat and unyielding. Smooth over how? Can you hand over the 8,500 yuan I need for my university registration fee right now? A beat of awkward silence dragged out on the line before Dad responded, defensive edge creeping into his voice. Your mom said we can pull the cash from Lila's wedding gift envelopes. Did Lila ask to keep all those wedding gifts for her own married household expenses? Shay cut in, already knowing the answer. She said she didn't need them, but your mom's holding onto the stack for household bills, Dad mumbled, unable to lie convincingly. Shay huffed a quiet, bitter laugh. So the gift money stays locked up for the family's daily costs, but my tuition gets pushed to the back burner indefinitely. Dad, do the math. The full 168,000 dowry contained 47,800 of my personal savings. Subtract that, you and Mom personally spent 120,200 yuan just to make Lila's wedding look impressive. You can drop over 120 grand without a second thought for her reputation, but 8,500 for my education is suddenly impossible to source. That's different money for different reasons. Dad argued weakly. No real justification to back the claim. Different how? It's all cash earned or saved by this family, yet only Lila's milestones get prioritized. Shay pressed. Are you truly unable to cover the fee? Or do you simply refuse to shift any resources away from her to support me? Dad couldn't form a single rebuttal. The line went dead a second later, call abruptly cut short without another word exchanged. Shay stuffed her phone back into her apron pocket and returned to wiping down diner tables, numb to the hollow guilt trip Key tried laying on her. 3 full weeks after Shay moved out, Lila tracked down her tiny urban village rental, navigating winding alleyways until she stood outside Shay's door, red-rimmed eyes visible the second Shay pulled the door open. The contrast between Lila's polished, expensive wedding attire and Shay's faded work uniform was impossible to ignore. You live here? Lila's voice wavered, glancing around the cramped, sweltering room with obvious pity. It's so cramped, no proper cooling, barely any furniture at all. How are you surviving day to day? Shay stepped aside to let her sister cross the threshold, leaning against the desk without inviting her to sit down. What brings you all the way out here? Did Mom send you to beg me to move back into the apartment? Lila bit down on her lower lip, shifting awkwardly on her heels, guilty tension radiating off her frame. Partially, yeah. She's falling apart over you leaving, crying every night, convinced she ruined our sisterhood forever. But I also wanted to talk to you on my own, without her hovering over every word. Let me ask you a single hypothetical, Lila, Shay said, gaze locked steady on her older sister's face. Swap our lives for 3 years. You're the one slinging bubble tea weekends, tutoring kids weeknights, freezing in supermarket stockrooms all summer to save 47,800 yuan for your university tuition. Then Mom secretly drains every cent to fund my fancy dowry and hides the whole plan from you until your wedding day arrives. What would you do in my position? Lila's mouth opened and shut repeatedly, no coherent response forming. She couldn't picture sacrificing 3 years of youth just to watch her life's work get stolen for someone else's benefit. She'd never once had to fight for a single dollar in her entire life, so Shay's pain was entirely abstract to her. I don't blame you, honestly. Shay softened her tone. No anger burning in her chest anymore, only exhausted acceptance. The whole household raised you to believe every resource automatically belongs to you first. You didn't invent this unfair system. Mom and Dad built it long before I turned 15. But I need one small favor from you before you leave today. Anything. I'll do whatever you ask to fix this mess between us. Lila rushed to promise, desperate to mend the fractured sisterly bond. Go back home and say one sentence to Mom, plain and unfiltered. Shay's savings belong only to Shay. They don't count as shared family cash to spend on Lila's wedding. Shay kept her request simple, no grand demands, just basic acknowledgement of her stolen property. Lila's shoulders sagged the second the request landed, gaze dropping to the scuffed concrete floor. She stood silent for nearly a full minute before whispering 2 defeated words, I'll try. Shay watched her sister walk back down the alley 10 minutes later, already certain Lila would never voice that line to their mother. Speaking those words would force Lila to confront the uncomfortable truth that her lavish, admired dowry was built on her younger sister's stolen future, and Lila had spent her whole life enjoying the perks of parental favoritism, with no willingness to surrender that comfort by rocking the boat. A full month passed after Shay moved out, and the weight of dual daily labor carved 6 pounds off her frame. Her routine never shifted. Wake at 6:30 a.m. Clock into the fast food diner by 7, finish the lunch rush at 3, crash for a single hour of restless sleep, rush to tutoring sessions starting at 5:30 p.m., wrap up teaching by 9:30 p.m. Trudge back to the rental room, wash uniforms, review self-study textbooks until midnight before collapsing into bed. She'd started researching self-taught university exam programs, planning to sign up for a business administration degree to open up better career opportunities long-term. The diner's owner, Aunt Wong, a warm 40-something woman who'd watched Shay grind nonstop every single shift, picked up on her quiet studying routine during off hours. One afternoon after closing, she pulled Shay into the back kitchen storage space with a quiet offer. I've got a friend running a breakfast stall who's short a morning server for hours a day, pays an extra 800 yuan monthly on top of your regular diner wage. If you're willing to squeeze the extra shift in, I can connect you tomorrow, Aunt Wong said, handing Shay a cold bottle of iced water to combat the stifling kitchen heat. Just don't burn yourself out working 3 jobs nonstop, kid. Shay's face lit up. The extra monthly cash would cut her tuition savings timeline nearly in half. I'll take it immediately. Thank you so much. I can handle the hours. No need to worry about me overworking. Aunt Wong scanned her worn, exhausted features, shaking her head with a quiet sigh. You've got a tough, resilient spirit, that's for sure. Not many kids your age could push through all this hardship alone. Shay smiled faintly at the compliment. Tough spirits, just another way to say I've had to fend for myself since I was 15. It's the only skill I've ever really mastered. That same evening, Shay's phone pinged with a new WeChat message from her mom, a half-hearted apology typed out across the screen. Lila convinced me to reach out and say I'm sorry about your savings. I'm working on gathering the full 47,800 to pay you back soon. Shay stared at the text for a long minute, then typed a calm, final reply with zero hesitation, hitting send without rereading the words twice. No need to track down the money anymore. I've proven I can earn every cent I need on my own without relying on anyone's handouts. From this point forward, my life, my finances, my education are fully my responsibility. Your household's affairs are yours to manage, separately. We lead separate lives now. I don't owe this family anything. She locked her phone screen and set it aside on the desk, ignoring the flood of panicked follow-up messages that arrived seconds later. The tiny USB fan hummed steadily beside her pillow as she laid back on the mattress, staring up at the water-stained ceiling. She waited for the wave of grief or heartbreak she'd expected to crash over her after cutting formal ties with her blood family, but it never came. Instead, a strange, light weightlessness settled deep in her chest, a relief she hadn't felt once in 18 years of living under her parents' roof. For the first time in her life, nothing she worked for could be taken away to prop up someone else's happiness. 3 more months slipped by, autumn cooling the sweltering summer air, and Shay tallied up her savings one evening after finishing tutoring. Between 3 steady jobs, she'd stacked 11,200 yuan total, more than enough to cover the full self-taught exam enrollment fees for a semester of business administration courses. Classes ran every Saturday and Sunday, leaving weekdays free to keep working her triple shift schedule. Aunt Wong rearranged Shay's diner hours to align with her weekend school schedule without a single complaint, prioritizing her education above extra service revenue. The exhaustion of back-to-back labor lingered constantly in her bones, but this tiredness differed entirely from the draining agony she'd endured living at home. Back then, every long shift felt like a sacrifice she'd never reap rewards from, every dollar earned marked for someone else's gain. Now, every hour of work built tangible progress toward her own degree, her own apartment, her own independent future. No hidden strings, no last-minute theft, no unspoken expectation to surrender everything for Lila's sake. Mid-November, a soft knock echoed on Shay's rental door late one afternoon. When she pulled it open, her mom stood in the alleyway, visibly thinner than she remembered, strands of gray hair scattered through her black locks, eyes red and swollen from constant crying. A twinge of faint pity tugged at Shay's chest. Blood still bound them, even after every betrayal. Come inside, it's cold out here. Shay stepped back to make space for her mom to cross the threshold, gesturing toward the single plastic chair by the desk while she perched on the edge of her bed. Her mom's gaze swept over the sparse, shabby room instantly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks at the sight of Shay's bare bones living conditions. You can't keep living like this, in a tiny room with no proper heating for winter. IT breaks my heart to see you struggling alone. I'm comfortable enough. It's clean and fully mine. Shay replied evenly, no trace of bitterness in her voice. Mom twisted her hands together nervously, rushing to deliver the news she'd traveled all this way to share. Lila's pregnant now. She and your husband are planning to move back into the apartment for a few months to save money while she's early in the pregnancy. She misses you terribly, begs every day for you to come home and stay with us again. Shay tilted her head slightly, unfazed by the announcement. Why are you here telling me this? Did you come to update me on Lila's pregnancy, or are you here to beg me to move back into the apartment? Mom's shoulders slumped, voice small and fragile. Truthfully, I just miss having you around the house. I miss my youngest daughter. The quiet 4 words hung heavy in the cramped room, carrying more weight than all the previous apologies combined. Shay studied her mother's tear-streaked face, processing the raw vulnerability she'd never witnessed before the day she moved out. You missed me all these years while you prioritized every single one of Lila's wants over mine? Shay asked gently, not accusatory, just seeking honest clarity. I didn't leave over the 47,800 yuan, Mom. Money can always be earned back with enough hard work. I left because I was invisible in that house. Lila's birthdays had fancy cakes. Mine got merged into hers to save cash. Lila's university tuition was fully covered. I had to work 3 jobs to scrape together fees. Lila got luxury skincare. I wore hand-me-down shoes stuffed with cotton to fit my feet. Even my 18th birthday, the day I legally became an adult, no one said a single happy birthday to me. All attention locked on Lila's wedding. Mom's sobs turned loud and unrestrained, head bowed into her palms. I'm so sorry I treated you that unfairly all these years. I never stopped to notice how much I overlooked you. Shay poured a cup of warm boiled water and handed it to her mom, maintaining a calm, steady demeanor as she laid out her permanent boundary lines without room for compromise. I don't need endless apologies to heal this rift. I only need you to accept 2 non-negotiable rules moving forward. First, I will never ask you or Dad for a single cent of financial support ever again. All tuition, rent, living costs will be covered entirely by my own wages. Second, you and Lila can never reach out to me asking for money, favors, or sacrifices to benefit her household. I'm not a backup piggy bank, and I refuse to be Lila's lifelong sacrifice anymore. I'm my own person, separate from her identity. Mom nodded through her tears, gripping the warm mug tight in her hands. Can I come visit you sometimes, though? Just to talk, no hidden requests or favors to ask of you. Shay gave a slow, genuine nod, a tiny crack softening her rigid boundaries. You're welcome to visit anytime, as long as you come here to see me as your daughter, not to pressure me into giving up my own life to fix Lila's problems. After lingering another 10 minutes, Mom stood to leave, pausing in the doorway for a long stretch of quiet hesitation before walking down the alley. Shay closed the door behind her, leaning against the cool wooden frame for a minute to collect her scattered thoughts, then turned back to her stack of self-study textbooks spread across the desk. Her upcoming exam loomed on the weekend, and she had no spare time to waste rehashing old family wounds. She didn't own a 6-figure dowry, no fully funded college education, no endless supply of new clothes or expensive skincare or birthday celebrations. But she held something far more valuable no one could ever steal. A self-earned exam registration slip, a small rental space fully under her control, 3 steady jobs paying wages solely for her own benefit, and a future she built brick by brick with her own 2 hands. Every single piece of this new life belonged to her, and her alone. The winter wind cut sharp through the alley cracks of Shay's village rental, seeping through the cracked window frame overnight. She'd splurged a little of her breakfast stall bonus money to buy a cheap cotton quilt, but even layered double, the chill still bit her limbs every dawn before her 6:30 shift alarm blared. It was mid-November, barely a week after her mother's tearful visit, and Shay had fully buried herself in work and self-study, determined to block out any lingering family chaos that might derail her tuition savings plan. Her daily rhythm never wavered. 4 hours flipping fried dough and steaming buns at the breakfast stall from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., then a full 8-hour shift waiting tables at the diner until 7 p.m., followed by 3 hours of math tutoring for local kids until 10 p.m. By the time she dragged herself back to her tiny room, her feet ached raw through her worn canvas shoes, her throat hoarse from talking to customers and students all day. She'd squeeze in 2 hours of business administration textbook reading before sleep, scribbling notes on scrap receipt paper when she couldn't afford proper notebooks. Aunt Wang pulled her aside one slow afternoon at the diner, sliding a steaming bowl of beef noodles across the counter without charging her. You've been running 3 jobs nonstop for 3 months straight, kid. You haven't taken a single day off. Aunt Wang frowned, wiping grease from her apron. If you burn out before exam season, all that money you've scraped together goes to waste. Take 1 Sunday off next week. My treat. No tutoring, no stall shifts, just rest. Shay stirred the noodle slowly, a faint, tired smile tugging at her lips. I can't afford to lose a day's wage. Every extra 100 yuan gets me closer to finishing the semester's fees early. Money's useless if you collapse from exhaustion, Aunt Wang huffed, softening her tone. I'll cover your breakfast stall pay for that Sunday myself. Don't argue with me. Shay nodded quietly, grateful for the first genuine adult care she'd received outside her blood family in years. Her own parents had never once offered to lighten her workload, never brought her a hot meal after a 12-hour shift, never asked if her frostbitten hands still hurt from supermarket labor years prior. The contrast stung less than it used to. Now she just accepted it as a permanent divide between the home she left and the small support system she'd built for herself. 3 days after her mother's visit, Lila showed up at the breakfast stall during Shay's morning shift. She'd wrapped a thick wool coat around her swollen early pregnancy belly, carrying a bulky fabric tote bag stuffed with snacks, fruit, and a brand new down jacket. She lingered by the stall's metal railing, waiting until the morning rush died down to approach Shay. Shay handed the last customer their steamed bun order before turning to face her sister, wiping flour off her stained apron. What are you doing here this early? You're supposed to be resting with the baby. Lila's eyes glistened, setting the tote bag on the stall's narrow countertop. I begged my husband to drop me off. Mom's been crying every night since she visited your room. She can't stop beating herself up over stealing your savings. I brought you warm clothes, fruit, all the food you can eat to get through winter. Shay glanced at the expensive branded down jacket peeking out the top of the bag, recognizing the same luxury brand Lila had worn through her entire college career. I don't need handouts, Lila. I can buy my own coats once I hit my tuition savings goal. It's not a handout. It's a sister's gift. Lila rushed, reaching out to grab Shay's flour-dusted wrist. I talked to Mom last night. She said she's going to sell the old gold bracelet Grandma left her to scrape together your full 47,800 yuan. She wants to pay every cent back to you before the end of the year, if you'll just come home. Shay pulled her wrist free gently, not yanking away harshly, but making it clear she didn't want physical contact. Selling Grandma's heirloom jewelry to return money she never should have taken in the first place isn't a solution. It's just trading one family loss for another. Grandma's bracelet was meant for you, wasn't it? Mom always said it would be passed down to the eldest daughter. Lila's face paled, staring at the ground. I didn't think about that part. I just wanted Mom to fix things between us. Fixing things isn't about handing me cash back after you both spent years taking my labor for granted, Shay said flat, stacking empty bamboo steamers to keep her hands busy. Even if she sells that bracelet and pays every yuan back, the years I spent freezing in supermarket stockrooms, skipping school social events, wearing hand-me-down shoes stuffed with cotton, none of that time gets returned to me. The invisible, constant feeling of being an afterthought in my own home doesn't vanish once the money's in my bank account. Lila's voice cracked, one tear slipping down her cheek. I didn't realize how much this hurt you until I moved into the marital house alone. No one jumps to fulfill every small request I make anymore. No one sacrifices their own plans to make my life easier. For the first time, I understand how lonely it must have been growing up in our apartment as the second daughter. Shay paused, staring at her sister's pregnant midsection, a flicker of sympathy softening her rigid stance. I'm glad you finally get a small glimpse of what I lived through, but that doesn't erase all the years of unfair treatment. I don't hate you anymore, but I can't move back into that house. If I return, the cycle will restart instantly. Next time you need something big, a new car, a bigger apartment for the baby, Mom will drain whatever savings I build again, convinced my future exists only to prop yours up. I'll stop her, I swear it, Lila pleaded, gripping the stall railing tight. I'll tell her every single time she tries to take anything you earn, I'll refuse to accept any money that comes from your hard work. You didn't stop her 3 years ago when she told you she was taking my savings for your dowry, Shay reminded her, quiet and unblinking. You knew exactly where that 47,800 yuan came from, and you let it happen without a single word of protest. I can't trust you to stand up for me now, not after you stayed silent when it mattered most. Lila had no rebuttal to that truth. She stood there silently for 10 minutes, watching Shay rush to serve straggling morning customers, before slinging the heavy tote bag back over her shoulder and turning to leave. She left the down jacket on the stall counter, refusing to take it back with her. Shay stuffed it into the stall's storage closet after her shift ended, planning to donate it to a second-hand clothing shop later that week. She wouldn't accept a costly gift bought with the guilt of stolen money. That evening, Dad called Shay's phone for the second time since she moved out. She answered while walking home from tutoring, her breath fogging in the cold night air. Your mother took that gold bracelet to the pawn shop today. They offered her 32,000 yuan for it. It's not enough to cover all 47,800 yet, but she's picking up a part-time cleaning job at the community hospital to earn the remaining 15,000 over the next 6 months. Dad's voice sounded worn, defeated. No more manufactured guilt trips, just raw exhaustion. She works hospital shifts every night after cooking dinner for us, comes home past midnight freezing cold, all just to pay you back. Shay slowed her pace on the dark alley path, kicking a small stone across the concrete. I never asked her to sell Grandma's jewelry or take a grueling night cleaning job. I only asked her to respect that my earnings belong to me. She chose to take this painful route instead of acknowledging her unfair treatment without scrambling to hand me cash as a band-aid. Is the money really all you care about? Dad asked, a faint note of hurt in his tone. I've told you a dozen times it's never about the money, Shay replied, voice steady despite the cold nipping at her cheeks. If it was just cash, I would have moved back the second you offered to pull the wedding gift envelope money for my tuition. It's about respect. For 18 years, no one in that house respected my labor, my goals, or my identity as a separate human being outside of Lila's sister. Selling jewelry and working night shifts doesn't fix that lack of respect. Dad fell silent for a long stretch. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible over the distant street traffic. We didn't know how to love two daughters equally. We messed up badly. I don't expect you to forgive us right away, but don't shut us out entirely. Your mother's every waking thought is about making amends to you. I don't shut her out from visiting, Shay clarified. She's welcome to come to my rental whenever she wants, as long as she doesn't beg me to move back or pressure me into sacrificing my life for Lila's baby. But I won't return to live under your roof. My boundaries aren't punishment. They're the only way I can keep building the future I've worked 3 years to start. The call ended without more conversation. Shay slipped her phone back into her coat pocket and continued walking toward her tiny room, the cold wind whipping her hair into her face. When she unlocked her door, she found a thin paper envelope tucked under the doormat, sealed with her mother's familiar handwriting. Inside was 5,000 yuan in cash, plus a short handwritten note. This is the first pawn shop installment. I'll pay the rest bit by bit, no matter how long it takes. I just want to earn your forgiveness. Shay stared at the thick stack of cash for a full hour after lighting her cheap desk lamp. She could deposit this money directly into her tuition fund and cut her working timeline shorter, eliminate one of her 3 grueling shifts. But holding the cash made her chest feel heavy, weighed down by the knowledge this money came from Grandma's precious heirloom, sacrificed to patch over a wound that ran far deeper than finances. The next morning, she brought the envelope and its full contents to the breakfast stall, waiting for her mother to show up during her hospital cleaning shift's break. When Mom spotted Shay waiting by the shop entrance with a cash envelope clutched tight, her eyes welled up instantly. "Take this back, I don't want the pawned bracelet money," Shay said, pressing the envelope into her mother's trembling hands. "Keep Grandma's jewelry. Sell it only if you truly need emergency household funds. Not to repay me, did I meant what I said in my WeChat message months ago. I don't need you to pay back the $47,800. I've earned enough to cover my tuition on my own." Mom's fingers wrapped around the envelope, so tight her knuckles whitened. "I have to make this right to you. I can't live knowing I stole your entire youth savings and got away with it without a single consequence. The consequence is me leaving home, setting permanent boundaries, and living independently without relying on your family's lopsided support system," Shay explained gently. "That's punishment enough for all of us. You don't need to destroy family heirlooms and exhaust yourself with night cleaning shifts to atone. All you need to do is see me as your daughter, not a spare piggy bank for Lila's life milestones." Mom folded the envelope against her chest, silent tears streaming down her face, too overcome to form a single sentence. She stayed standing beside the stall for 20 minutes, watching Shay serve customers, before turning to trudge back toward the hospital for her night cleaning shift. Shay didn't call after her, didn't soften her stance. She knew backing down now would undo every hard-won freedom she'd fought for since her 18th birthday. 2 weeks later, Shay completed her self-taught university registration, paying the full semester fee of 8,500 yuan entirely from her triple job savings. Holding the official admission slip in her hands that night, she sat on her thin mattress and stared at the paper for hours, a quiet, genuine sense of pride bubbling up in her chest. No parental financial aid, no stolen savings, no handouts from relatives. Every single cent on that receipt came from her own endless hours of labor. She snapped a photo of the enrollment slip and sent it only to Aunt Wang via WeChat, no message to her parents or Lila. Aunt Wang replied within minutes, sending a small red envelope bonus and a message brimming with warmth. "So proud of you, kid. All that hard work finally paid off. Come to the diner tomorrow after your shift. I made you a celebratory braised pork meal in the house." That weekend marked the one day off Aunt Wang had forced her to take. Shay slept in until 9 a.m. A luxury she hadn't allowed herself in over a year, then spent the afternoon reading her textbooks without rushing off to a shift, sipping cheap hot water by the window. The tiny USB fan had been swapped out for a thin electric heater she'd bought with spare stall wages, chasing away the bitter winter chill in her room. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't wake up with a knot of anxiety in her stomach worrying about unpaid fees or stolen savings. Late that Sunday evening, a soft knock arrived at her door. When Shay pulled it open, both her parents and a visibly pregnant Lila stood lined up in the cold alley, each carrying small, modest gifts. Dad held a bag of cheap coal briquettes for her space heater. Mom brought homemade pickled vegetables she'd preserved herself. Lila clutched a soft baby blanket she'd knitted in her spare time. No fancy, expensive goods, no desperate cash envelopes. Only quiet, humble gestures with no hidden demands attached. "We just wanted to congratulate you on getting into the self-taught program," Mom said quietly, voice raw from cold and leftover grief. "We saw your admission slip photo on Aunt Wang's phone when we ran into her at the market yesterday. We didn't come to beg you to move back or ask anything of you. We just wanted to say we're truly proud of what you've built all by yourself." Shay stepped aside, letting the 3 of them file into her cramped room, making space for them to sit on the bed and a single plastic chair. No arguments erupted, no emotional guilt trips, no pleas for repayment or forgiveness. They sat in quiet, calm conversation for an hour, talking about Lila's upcoming due date, Shay's upcoming weekend classes, the slow pace of Mom's hospital cleaning job. For the first time since Shay turned 15, the conversation didn't revolve around money, dowries, or unequal sacrifice. It was just 4 family members talking plainly, without unspoken obligations hanging over every word. As they prepared to leave, Dad paused at the doorway and glanced back at Shay. "We'll keep visiting whenever you're okay with it. We won't overstay, won't push you to change your living arrangements. We just want to be present for you, on your terms this time." Shay nodded, a faint, genuine smile tugging at her mouth. "That's all I ever asked for." After they left, Shay closed the door and leaned against the wood, staring at the simple pickled vegetable jar and coal bag resting on her desk. The rift between her and her blood family hadn't fully healed, and the years of unfair neglect would never be erased entirely. But for the first time since her 18th birthday, the day her savings were stolen and her sister married, she felt a small, fragile sense of peace settle over her. She still had no lavish dowry, no parents willing to fund her education, no lifelong stream of unearned favors and luxury gifts handed to her without effort. But she owned a university admission slip, a safe, quiet room entirely her own, 3 jobs that put every earned dollar solely in her pocket, and clear, unbreakable boundaries that protected her future from anyone who might try to take it away again. This life was hard, filled with endless early mornings and sore, exhausted nights. But every single piece of it belonged to Shay, and no one would ever be allowed to steal that truth from her again.